This is Gemara Baba Basra Daf Chof Vav, and we're holding the bottom of Chof Heyamid Bees, the Mishnah towards the bottom. Yes, we pulled up a little bit short in the previous Daf, but B'siyata D'Shemaya, we'll be able to make that up today. So we begin the Mishnah, continuing the theme of distancing different items from different properties. Marchikin es ilan min habar es v'chamish ama. You have to distance a tree 25 amais from your neighbor's pit. If it's a carob or a sycamore tree, then you have to distance it 50 amais. Continues the Gemara. Bein malmala, bein minatzat. This is true whether it is above higher ground, below or lower ground, or minatzad. Bein malmala, bein minatzad. Continues the Mishnah. Im habar kadma. If the bar was there first, kaitzitz v'neisein damim v'meilan kadam lo yikaitz. If the tree was there first, then you don't need to cut it down. Safek zeh kadam v'safek zeh kadam lo yikaitz. Even though the bar came first, why? He says Rav Yosi, each person is allowed to do his own. And if this sounds familiar, that's because the Mishnah that we had 2 days ago on Chavdal Mebeis was almost a carbon copy of a tree distancing from a city. Mamish, the same Mishnah, Marchikin Elon, 25 amos, Charvin Shikma, 50 amos. And the Mishnah over there as well spoke about which one came first. Suffix zeh, Koitzeitz v'noisein damim. And the Gemara had a very similar explanation to what we just had in the Mishnah. But now we begin our Mishnah. Tana. So there was a unique detail in our Mishnah, which was the din of the Mishnah was applicable whether the tree was lamala or whether it was minatzad. Says the Gemara, Tana bin shabar lamata v'ilan lemaila, whether the bar is below and the tree is above, bin shabar lemala v'ilan lemata. That's the obvious implication. I don't know if it's even an implication, but the Brisa elaborating are almost the pasha din that comes out of our Mishnah. So says the Gemara, if the pit is on the bottom and the tree is on the top, I understand because in the Shirashin, bar. If the tree is on a higher ground, then the roots go down and it's going to ruin the bar. But if the bar is on the top ground and the tree is on the bottom ground, how do the roots of the tree go upward to harm the bar? Says Rav Chago B'Shem Rav Yosi, you're right that it's not going to directly harm the bar. But you know what it's going to do? It's going to go under the ground of the bar and damage the floor of the bar. How? By loosening it. If the bar is up here and the tree's down here, so the tree travels underneath. Now the area under the bar has the roots of the tree, which effectively are going to weaken the ground, and that's how it causes the bar to have issues. Continues the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom. Says Rabbi Yosi at the end of the Mishnah, even if the bar came first, you still cannot cause him to cut down his tree. Why? Because each is allowed to do their own. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel Halacha Rav Yosi. That is the Psak Halacha. Amar Rav Ashi Yavin Bei Rav Kana Ve'amrinon. My dear Rav Yosi, Rav Yosi admits Begira Didei. Yosi admits regarding his girim, his arrows, that if it's a direct cause, then Rav Yosi is masking that you would have to distance. If you look at Rashi, Begira Didei, Rashi speaks out, like we learned about Mitzia, Hanu Beitrech, one is living above the other, where it's a direct cause of damage, then Rav Yosi is masking. In our Mishnah, it's indirect, and that's Rav Yosi says you can't cause him to cut down his tree. And we have a story that shows this din. Papi Yoinoi, Ani Vehesher. Papi Yoinoi was poor and he became wealthy. Bana Padina, Havai Bana Padni built a mansion. Have Hanoch Atsuri B'Shavisa. And there were some people, Atsuri, Rashi says, who are Atsuri? They're people that press sesame to make sesame oil in his neighborhood. B'Shavisa. Tchave Daiki Shumshavi, Have Naidi, excuse me. Let's get the page back open in front of us. Here we go. When they would press the sumshimi, it would cause his mansion to tremble, to shake. His town were, I guess, paupers like he used to be, and they would grind up these sesame seeds into sesame oil, and it was causing him an issue. So Papi, he's not happy. So he comes to Rav Ashi and he says to Rav Ashi, he wants these people to move. Amar Lei, Rav Ashi responds, Ki havon be Rav Kana avi amrinon. When I was in the yeshiva of Rav Kana, he would say, Moider Rav Yosef gira delay, that if it's gira delay, then you have to distance. So too over here, Rav Ashi says these sesame people, since it's gira delay, it's a direct cause, and therefore they have to move as they are harming your mansion. Says the Gemara Vekama, and how much does, as the Banam Rashi says, how much does it have to cause the mansion to be moving to tell the sesame people that they have to move? As we turn over to Chavav Amid Beis, says the Gemara, you know how much it has to move? Has to move Kidinoyed Nichtama Abume de Chatzba. It has to move enough that the lid of the barrel shakes from the vibrations. That's the meaning. A real tremor, not a little shake, has to be that the barrels in the house are shaking due to the sesame people pressing their sesame. And Rashi says that if you leave a kara l'chayma and the cover on top of it, the cover will shake due to all the shaking. Continues the Abumi de Chatzva. Continues the Gemara in the top line of Chavav and Aleph. Devei Bar Miriam, Abrei Deravin. Devei Bar Miriam, the people of the Bar Miriam, who's a son of Ravin, Kavin Nasvi Kisna, when they would beat their flax, Have Ozla Raksa, Umazki Inchi. The Raksa, the shaft, would fly off and harm people. Also, came to Ravina, Amr Lake, Amrina, Moidi Rav Yosef Begir delay, Animili Azli Mikoichoi. When did Rav Yosef say that it's gira delay? And of course, over here they want them to move because their flax is harming them when the chaff flies out. But he explains Rav Yosef only says is when it is Mikoichoi. Over here, it's not koichai. What causes the chaff to hit these other people? It's the wind that carries it. When you have an arrow, you pull back the arrow. It's your koyach that shoots the arrow. That's when Rabbi Yossi says you have to move. But over here, it's not your koyach. Over here, rather, it's the wind, and therefore they don't have to move. Asks the Gemara, Maskva Mar Baravashi, Ma'ishana. What is the difference when it comes to Zaira on Shabbos winnowing? And the wind helps. And of course, it's called Chol Shabbos. It's called your action. So why is it not the same thing over here? Says the Gemara, Amrita Kamei, the Mreimar. He says in front of him, Mreimar and Amar Leho, and he said, Hainu Zaira V'ruach Mesayatoi. This is Zaira V'ruach Mesayatoi, meaning it is called Kaichai, and therefore these guys who were beating the flax and the chaff was flying and harming other people, they do indeed have to move. But explains the Gemara, the Ravina Maishina. According to Ravina, what's the difference in this case? That if a spark flies out from under the blacksmith's hammer, a Gemara in Shabbos that we had, a Gemara in Baba Kama that we had, that you do have to pay. Says the Gemara, there's a fundamental difference. Over there, in the case of the blacksmith, when he bangs his hammer and a spark flies, he does not want that spark to fly right next to him. He's happy for it to fly elsewhere because he doesn't want to harm his own property, so he hits with extra force so that it flies outwards. However, these flax beaters, they don't really care where it flies. Therefore, it's not called their maisa, and therefore they would be potter, as it's considered that the wind took the chaff when it harmed someone else, according to Ravina. Continues the next Mishnah, Chavav Amud Aleph. Lo yita adam ilan samar l'sad chaveiroi. You can't plant a tree near the field of your friend. Elem kein erchem mimenu arba mois. Echad gifanim. This is whether it's grapevines, vechad kolilan, or all trees. You got to be 4 amos away from your friend's field. If there is a fence, each one could go up until the fence. Let's say if the roots are going into your friend's property, you dig down 3 tfachim and get rid of the roots. Because you don't want it to mess up the plow. If the neighbor is digging a pit and he hits your roots, he cuts down whatever he finds necessary, and the wood that he gets, he keeps for himself. Says the Gemara. So again, this is really a direct offshoot of the previous Mishnah. But now we're dealing with, on one hand, the beginning of the Mishnah is Daled Amos Yirmarchik, you distance your tree. Din number 2 is that if the fence, you go all the way up to the fence. And din number 3 is the roots that go into the neighboring property, how you're able to dispose of those so it doesn't ruin the other neighbors, plowing, etc. Says the Gemara Tana, let's deal with the first din in the Mishnah. Arba amos amru kidei avodas aikaren. Why do you need 4 amos? Why do you have to distance 4 amos away from your neighboring field? For the work of a vineyard, you need to have enough room to work the vineyard. Amar Shmuel, says Shmuel, Lo yishanu ela b'Eretz Yisrael, aval beBavel shtei amos. In Bavel, only 2 amos is necessary. And the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel over here is, Rashi says, Shemachrishasan Kitsara, different types of plows. In Eretz Yisrael, the plow is apparently 4 amos. So you have to leave 4 amos so that he can get around his area and plow it. Whereas in Bavel, they had smaller plows. Tanami Hachi, a riot to this, 2 lines from the white lines. To Adam Ilan, Samach Le Sadech Haveroi. One cannot plant a tree near the field of his friend. Alam kinirchemenu shtei amos. Vanantanan in the first white line, 4 amos. Elalav kedish Shmuel Shema mi no. Those who asked this as a stira. Tanan, we learned to the Mishnah Tanya on the third white line, Israel. So either it was a kasha or it was a raya, but either way, it depends on how big the plow is. That's how far you have to distance the tree from your neighboring field. Rava bar Rav Chanan, Havale Hanu Dikli. He had these palm trees on Mitzrah de Pardisa, on the boundary of the Pardisa, of the vineyard of Rav Yosef. Haviyasi Sipoiri. Now birds would come and Yasi V'dikla and sit on the palm tree. V'nachte b'Pardisa umafsedi lei. And then they would go into the vineyard and damage it. So one guy has these trees. The trees attract the birds to sit on it. And now the birds go next door and damage his crop. Amar lei. So Rav Yosef says to Rabbi Chanan, Zel kites, please cut down your trees because it's ruining my vineyard. Amar lei, Rabbi Chanan replies, Varchikuli. What do you mean? But I've already went 4 amos away. Like the Mishnah said, my tree is not directly next to your property. It's a good 4 amos away from the Kerem. So what's the problem? Amar lei, says Rabbi Yosef, Hani mili lanois. The Mishnah is only by trees. Avali gefanim, being in tfei. You're next to my vineyard, then you need more than 4 amos. Says the Gemara, what do you mean? But not to not. But our Mishnah said, Echad gefanim, vechad kolilan. Amar lei. So Rabbi Yosef responds, Hani mili ilan li-ilan. Ugefanim li-gefanim. That's if you have 2 like items, trees next to trees, vineyards next to vineyards. Aval ilan li-gefanim, then it says Rabbi Yosef, B'inan tfei. So Amar lei, so Rabbi Chanan said, Ana loy kayatzna. I will not cut down the palm tree myself. Why? Because I have a problem. Any tree that still bears a kava fruit, you're not allowed to cut it down. Meaning, so Rav Chanan acquiesced and agreed, okay, you're right. I have to cut down my tree. But he says, what should I do? I'm not allowed to cut down a true fruit tree. Rav Chanina said, Lo shachav shichvas bri. Says Rav Chanina, my son Shichvas died prematurely. Because he cut down a fruit tree, not its right time. Mar lekuts. But he said to his neighbor Rav Yosef, if you want, you could cut it down. Rav Yosef held it was harming him, and that's one of that Terim to cut down the fruit tree. So Rav Chanan didn't want to do it on it. Rav Chanan didn't want to do it himself. But Rav Yosef, he told Rav Yosef, if you want, you could. Just parenthetically, we see from these discussions, sometimes people hear about disputes amongst neighbors. You should have a fence. You shouldn't have a fence. You should have a tree. And people want to chalk it up to petty disputes. It's not a petty dispute. It's Chaysha Mishpat. There are halachos. We see over here two great Gedolim, Rav Bar Chanan and Rav Yosef. They're sitting here and they're having a discussion. Doesn't sound like they're yelling and screaming, but you're allowed to have a discussion whether your item is harming my field, etc., etc. Just a parenthetical comment on the story over here, but also we see the incredible halacha that one is not allowed to cut down a fruit tree unless it is causing damage. And we continue 7 lines to the end of the Amud. The first one line is Leikuts. Going into the end of the Mishnah, which is a part of the Mishnah that dealt with the roots growing into the neighboring field and causing damage. Rav Papa Havale Hanu Dikla had palm trees amidst the Ravuna Bered Rav Yeshua on the boundary with Ravuna Bered Rav Yeshua, and Rav Papa's roots of the palm trees went into Ravuna's property. Also, so what happens is Rav Papa comes and he sees that what's Ravuna Bered Rav Yeshua doing? Chafar, he's digging holes in his property. And he's cutting up his roots. So Rav Papa's roots are growing into his neighboring property, and he sees his neighbor sitting there digging down and cutting up his roots. Amar Leis, Rav Papa says, "My eye, what are you doing over here? You're cutting down the roots. You're ruining my trees." Amar Lei. So Rav Huna Breder Yeshua responds, "Tanan, what do you mean? Our Mishnah says, I am allowed to dig down 3 tfachim so that it doesn't ruin my plow, and therefore that's what I'm doing. I'm digging down, cutting up the roots for 3 tfachim so I can plow my field." Amar Lei, Rav Papa responds, "Hani mili shleisha mar kachaver tvei." You're digging much more. Amar Lei, Ravuna responds. Amar Lei, Ravuna Beishur responds, "Ano bar shichlem ha'aris kachaverna." You're right. I'm digging more. I'm digging a well. The Tanan. What did the end of the Mishnah say? Hayachav bar shichlem ha'aris sichamara. Kite says the yard of eitzim shalai. Then you're allowed to cut it up and you're allowed to keep the wood. Amar Papa on the last line. Amru Lei Kuli. I told him that everything that he was forbidden to cut down the roots. But Lamaisa says, Rav Papa, I didn't win. Ad Amrile. As we turn over to, excuse me, let's get the page. Here we go. Ad Amrile says Rav Papa. As we turn over to Chavav Amid base. Ad Amrile until I told him, Had Amar Rav Yehuda, that which Rav Yehuda said. Matzah shechzika by Rabbim, that what? A boundary which is on the public area, a boundary in which, the Rabbim were machzik a right to that area, aser lekalkalai. So says Rav Papa, just like if the Rabbim were machzik their rights to be in an area, you're not allowed to get rid of it. Says Rav Papa, I too have a chazaka on my roots over here, and you, Ravuna Breder Yeshua, are not allowed to cut it down. Look at the top Rashi. If the Rabbim have a derech and you're not allowed to root an af yishu shal yachid. Anon nami, says Rav Papa, achzikulei. Lebasar dinafik amar. After Rav Papa left, Ravuna Breder Yeshua said, Amai loy amri lei. Why did I not tell him? Kan b'toich shisha tzriyama, kan chutz l'shisha tzriyama. When is it true? When they hear the roots are within 16 amots of the tree, where here the roots are not within 16 amots of the tree. If you look at Rashi, Rashi explains, when is it a chazaka only within 16 amos? More than that, it is not and therefore Rav Huna Bar Yeshua really held his own that he was allowed to cut down the roots. But we're seeing that in the Mishnah that you're allowed to cut down the roots if you want to do something in your own field is only if your neighbor was not machzik or if it's outside of the requisite area that the roots are allowed to go. We continue 5 lines down. The end of the Mishnah. Yaakov Hadaiva Merav Chisda asked the following question: Eitzim Shelmi. Who does the wood belong to? I mean, the Mishnah said Eitzim Shalai. So we translated it as the one who's cutting down the Eitzim, the one who's digging the well in his property, he keeps the wood. But they asked the Shaila, is that accurate or not? Amr Leitani Tua. We have a Mishnah. Sharsha Ilan Shal Hedyet, Abayim Bishal Hektish. That if we have the roots of a tree of a Hedyet, we extend into land that belongs to Hektish, Loy Nehenin, V'loy Ma'alin. You're not allowed to get benefit from the roots, and you're not over Mi'ila by benefiting from them. So now he explains, if you're going to tell me that the roots go back to whom owns the tree, then it makes sense that there's no Me'ilah because the roots belong to the tree owner, and therefore the roots belong to Hedyet and not Hektish, and therefore there's no Me'ilah. I mean, if you're going to tell me Basra Karkas Linan, like we thought to learn the Mishnah, that when you dig it up, it goes after he's the one that's allowed to keep it. There should be Me'ilah because it's currently in Hektish. So says the Gemara, must be that it belongs to the owner of the tree. Elamai, says the Gemara, Basra Ilan Aslinan. Ema Seifa, go look at the end of that brisa. Shalhek, the opposite case of Shalhedi, loy nanim, loy mayalin, vibas ilan azlinan, amay loy mayalin. So says the Gemara, no, you got it all wrong. Midi Airia, this Mishnah of Hektish has no sheiches. This talking about Begidulan Abayin La'achar, Mikan Askinon. The Mishnah dealing with new roots, they come after the property became Hektish. And with such roots, v'kasaver ein Me'ilah, Begidulan. There's no such thing as Me'ilah with new growths, and therefore it's irrelevant who owns the property. Therefore, we also can't bring a raya to our Mishnah. A second teretz, Ravina Amar like Kasha, again, similar to what we learned on the top of the Amid, Kam b'toish within the requisite 16 amas that one has for his tree, then it will go bust to the tree. If it's outside, in the latter case, that goes to the landowner, is where it's extending past the 16 amas, and therefore it will go to the one who owns the land. We'll pick it up from here, B'siyata Dishmaya.